Wheel of randomness, turn, turn, turn. Tell us the 15 minutes that we shall learn. Welcome to Randomly 15 Minutes, where we give you a topic in 15 minutes or less, or your podcast is free. I'm your writer, Sam Rossi, and shortly Megan Klodnicki will be reading a script written by me on a topic she may or may not know about. This shall be fun.
Hey everybody, welcome to Randomly 15 Minutes. I am your hostess, Megan Klodnicki, and I don't see these scripts ahead of time. It's right when Sam and I are going to record, so as soon as I opened this one up, I was like, again, we have UK royalty, everybody. I said to her, they need to stop, man. So, on today's Wheel of Random, we are going to discuss Charles II. So Sam says we've discussed James I and Charles I, and go listen to those episodes if you haven't. But today we have up next Charles II after England killed his father for treason. And we are starting off strong in this right now. And here we go. Charles was born at St. James's Palace on May 29th, 1630, eldest surviving son of Charles I, King of England, Scotland, and Ireland, and his wife Henrietta Maria, sister of Louis the 13th of France. Around his 8th birthday, he made Prince of Wales, but was never actually invested, meaning he was Prince of Wales in name only. Figures, because it's an 8-year-old kid, not 18. It's an 8-year-old kid. In August 1642, the long-running dispute between Charles I and Parliament culminated in the outbreak of the First English Civil War. In October, Prince Charles and his younger brother James were present at the Battle of Edge Hill and spent the next 2 years based in the royalist capital of Oxford. Charles I surrendered into captivity in May 1646. Despite his son's diplomatic efforts to save him, the execution of Charles I took place in January of 1649 and England became a republic. On February 5th, the Covenanter Parliament of Scotland proclaimed Charles II as King of Britain, France, and Ireland at the Market Cross, Edinburgh, but refused to allow him to enter Scotland unless he agreed to establish Presbyterianism as the state religion in all 3 of his kingdoms. When negotiations stalled with the Scots, Charles ordered a fake invasion with Lord Montrose leading the army. Montrose, fearing a compromise, actually attacked, and he was captured, leading Charles II to agree with changing the religion for the Isles. Upon his arrival in Scotland on June 23, 1650, he formally agreed to the Covenant, his abandonment of Episcopal Church governance, although winning him support in Scotland left him unpopular in England. Charles' Scottish coronation led to the Anglo-Scottish War of 1650 to 1652. On September 3rd, 1650, the Covenanters were defeated at Dunbar by a much smaller force commanded by, and here he is again, Oliver Cromwell. The Scots were divided between moderate engagers and the more radical Kirk party, who even fought each other. Disillusioned by these divisions, Charles rode north to join an engager force in October, an event which became known as, quote-unquote, the Start. But within 2 days, members of the Kirk party had recovered him. He was crowned King of Scotland on January 1st, 1651. With Cromwell's threatening Charles' crown in Scotland, an attack was mounted to take England. However, most of the soldiers were excluded on religious grounds. So, Charles lost and fled to Normandy on October 16th. Under the instrument of government passed by Parliament, Cromwell was appointed Lord Protector of England, Scotland, and Ireland in 1653, effectively placing the British Isles under military rule. After the death of Oliver Cromwell in 1658, Charles's initial chances of regaining the crown seemed slim. Cromwell was succeeded as Lord Protector by his son Richard. However, the new Lord Protector had little experience of either military or civil administration. In 1659, the Rump Parliament was recalled and Richard Cromwell resigned. During the civil and military unrest that followed, George Monk, the governor of Scotland, was concerned that the nation would descend into anarchy. Monk and his army marched into the city of London and forced the Rump Parliament to readmit members of the Long Parliament, who had been excluded in December 1648 during Pride's Purge. Parliament dissolved itself, and there was a general election for the first time in almost 20 years. The outgoing Parliament defined the electoral qualifications intending to bring about the return of a Presbyterian majority. The restrictions against royalist candidates and voters were widely ignored, and the elections resulted in a House of Commons that was fairly evenly divided on political grounds between royalists and parliamentarians, and on religious grounds between Anglicans and Presbyterians. The so-called Convention Parliament assembled on April 25, 1660, and soon afterward welcomed the Declaration of Breda, in which Charles promised lenience and tolerance. There would be liberty of conscience, and Anglican church policy would not be harsh. He would not exile past enemies nor confiscate their wealth. There would be pardons for nearly all his opponents except the regicides. Above all, Charles promised to rule in cooperation with Parliament. The English Parliament resolved to proclaim Charles king and invite him to return, a message that reached Charles at Breda on May 8, 1660. In Ireland, a convention had been called earlier in the year and had already declared for Charles. On May 14th, he was proclaimed king in Dublin. Basically, it took 20 years to realize they needed a king. He arrived in London on his 30th birthday. Although Charles and Parliament granted amnesty to nearly all of Cromwell's supporters in the Act of Indemnity and Oblivion, 50 people were specifically excluded. In the end, 9 of the regicides, men who killed Charles I for treason, were executed. They were hanged, drawn, and quartered, whereas others were given life imprisonment or excluded from office for life. The bodies of Oliver Cromwell, Henry Ireton, and John Bradshaw were subjected to posthumous decapitations. The Convention Parliament was dissolved in December 1660, and shortly after Charles's English coronation, the Second English Parliament of the reign assembled. Dubbed the Cavalier Parliament, it was overwhelmingly royalist and Anglican. It sought to discourage nonconformity to the Church of England and passed several acts to secure Anglican dominance. The Corporation Act of 1661 required municipal office holders to swear allegiance. The Act of Uniformity 1662 made the use of the 1662 Book of Common Prayer compulsory. The Conventicle Act 1664 prohibited religious assemblies of more than 5 people, except under the divine token of the Church of England, and so on. The Restoration was accompanied by social change. Puritanism lost its momentum. Theaters reopened after having been closed during the protectorship of Oliver Cromwell, and bawdy restoration comedy became a recognizable genre. Theater licenses granted by Charles required that female parts be played by their natural performers, air quotes, rather than by boys, as was often the practice before. And Restoration literature celebrated or reacted to the restored court, which included libertines such as Lord Rochester. In 1665, the Great Plague of London began, peaking in September with up to 7,000 deaths per week. Charles, his family, and the court fled London in July to Salisbury. Parliament met in Oxford. Plague cases ebbed over the winter, and Charles returned to London in February 1666. After a long spell of hot and dry weather through mid-1666, the Great Fire of London started on September 2nd, 1666, in Pudding Lane. Fanned by strong winds and fed by wood and fuel stockpiled for winter, The fire destroyed about 13,200 houses and 87 churches, including St. Paul's Cathedral. Charles and his brother James joined and directed the firefighting effort. The public blamed Catholic conspirators for the fire. Charles will, Charles will go on to marry, start some wars, and fight with Parliament. Charles faced a political storm over his brother James, a Catholic, being next in line to the throne. The prospect of a Catholic monarch was vehemently opposed by the first Earl of Shaftesbury, a former member of the Cabal, which had fallen apart in 1673. Lord Shaftesbury's power base was strengthened when the House of Commons of 1679 introduced the Exclusion Bill, which sought to exclude the Duke of York from the line of succession. Some even sought to confer the crown of the Protestant Duke of Monmouth, the eldest of Charles's illegitimate children. The abhorrers, those who thought the Exclusion Bill was abhorrent, makes sense, were named Tories, after a term for dispossessed Irish Catholic bandits. While the petitioners, those who supported a petitioning campaign in favor of the Exclusion Bill, were called Whigs. Whigs, like whipped, cool whip, after a term for rebellious Scottish Presbyterians. Fearing that the Exclusion Bill would be passed and bolstered by some acquittals in the continuing plot trials, which seemed to him to indicate a more favorable public mood towards Catholicism, Charles dissolved the English Parliament for a second time that year in mid-1679. Charles's hopes for a more moderate parliament were not fulfilled. Within a few months he had dissolved Parliament yet again, after it sought to pass the Exclusion Bill. When a new Parliament assembled at Oxford in March 1681, Charles dissolved it for a fourth time after just a few days. For the remainder of his reign, Charles ruled without Parliament. Sam got bored with him fighting about who should be next in line. Charles suffered a sudden apoplectic fit on the morning of February 2nd, 1685, and died 4 days later at the Palace of Whitehall at 11:45 a.m., aged 54. Charles was succeeded by his brother James II. That's a lot.
And that wasn't even half of it.
Oh my goodness.
There was a long list of different things that happened during the Civil War and the Parliament
Oh my
and
gosh.
so much.
Wow. It was I think what really stuck out to me the most was the fire, because all I thought was, oh my goodness, as them as firefighters in the 1600s.
Well, when everything's on fire, you're going to be in the front of the line if you're supposed to be a ruler and a good ruler.
Yeah. And it's just interesting, like, to think about that from, their aspect of things, and throwing water and stuff, and my goodness.
Well, they lost a
But
lot that year.
yeah. Yeah. But yeah, there's I think I just got lost throughout reading it, because it's like you just go back and forth with things, and it just goes to show it doesn't matter for politics. It's the same no matter what.
It really is, oddly enough, and I'm
Just
learning
saying.
this just following the monarchy.
Mm-hmm. It's true. It's true.
History, man, it's going to repeat itself.
It does. Everyone wants to think they're unique in that, but it's not.
Nope.
Because where do you learn the patterns from?
Exactly.
But I got nothing else on it. Just there was a lot.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm fine. I'm just saying.
It was a lot of information. I realize that now after listening to it.
That's all good. I think it spoke for itself.
I think it
So
did. All right, I'm Sam Rossi.
I'm Megan Nikki.
Later, y'all.
Bye.